Okay, welcome back everyone to another week of Torah and Chizuk, hopefully, Be'ez Hashem, as we try to glean the Chizuk, the inspiration, from the Parsha Hashavua itself. This week is PARSHAS TOLDOS. It's the birth of Yaakov and of Esav. I'd like to ask a bunch of questions on the Parsha, and then we'll go back and we'll answer them. I think there is a fantastic thread that is running through the Parsha and all of these answers. Question number 1 on this week's Parsha. We know that in the beginning of the Parsha, the Pasuk tells us, Vayi Yitzchak ben Arbaim Shana bekachta es Rivka. Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, and as a wife, and Rivka was Bas Besuel, the daughter of Besuel HaRami, of Besuel HaRami mi Padan Aram, from a place called Padan Aram. Acha is Lavan, the sister of Lavan Arami. Lavan the Arami Loili Isha. He took her as a woman, as a wife. So the question, as we'll see in Rashi and the others, is we already know Rivka's lineage. We know where she comes from. We know who her father was, who her brother was, the town that she came from, the city. We know all of that. The Torah never has to waste an extra single drop of ink, so we don't have to repeat her. It's not even her yichus so much. We're repeating where she's coming from and who her brother and her father were. Why does the Torah have to do that? That's question number 1. Why does the Torah feel that it's necessary to tell us that information? Question number 2. The verse goes on further, and it tells us that Yitzchak and Rivka were davening many years to have children. Finally, their prayers are answered, and it says, Vayisroitzitzu habanim bikirba. And the banim, the children that were inside of her stomach, she had twins, obviously, Esav and Yaakov and Esav. So the twins that were inside of the stomach of their mother Rivka were Yisroitzitzu, as Rashi points out, they were trying to run out of the womb of their mother. Every time she would pass by the house of a Beis HaMidrash, a yeshiva where they could learn, Yaakov was trying to escape. And every time they would pass by the Beis Avodah Zarah, a house of idol worship, so Esav would try to escape. So there's a very famous question that is asked. We know that when a child is in utero, in the mother's womb, Chazal tell us that there's a malach, there's an angel that is coming and teaching that child Kol HaTorah Kula, all of the Torah in the world and everything that it will need to know when it comes in here. If you're Yaakov Avinu and your whole life is going to be Torah, that's as we see from the moment that he's born, he is Yoshev, he's the Ishtam Yoshev Oila, he's the simple man who sits in the tents of study, and you are learning with the malach, with the angel that is going to teach you Kol HaTorah Kula, everything. So why are you trying to run out of your mother's stomach to get into the Beis Midrash, to get to the yeshiva? You've got the greatest yeshiva in the world inside of there with a malach, with an angel. It doesn't get better than that. You'll go to yeshiva, some days you'll understand what's going on, some days you might not understand. You might like the Rabbi, you might not like the Rabbi, but you have a malach Hashem, you have an angel that's teaching you. Why was Yaakov trying to get out of the womb of his mother to go into the Beis HaMidrash, to go to the house of study? That's question number 2. Question number 3. The verse, the Torah goes on and it tells us they were born. You have an Esav, you have a Yaakov, and the pasuk tells us. The following: V'yehav Yitzchak es Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav, kitzai befiv, because he was tricky in his mouth. He was very sly with his mouth. Rivka oheves es Yaakov, and Rivka loved Yaakov. Why did Yitzchak love Esav? He sees clearly. He should see clearly who his 2 children are. He has one kid who's a tzaddik, sits in the Beis Midrash, learns all day long. He has another one who's out there in the fields doing all his fieldly activities. So what does it mean over here that Yitzchak loved Esav? And why is it that, and because Tzayid Befiv, which means he was somehow tricked into the smooth tongue that Esav had, why was Rivka not fooled by the smooth tongue of Yitzchak, of Yaakov, the way that Yitzchak was, and she did not love Esav. She clearly loved Yaakov, as the pasuk says. She loved Yaakov. So again, the question is, why is it that Yitzchak was able to be fooled by the smooth talking tongue of Esav, but Rivka herself was not? And another question. The pasuk, the Torah goes on further, and it tells us that Vayihi ki zokein Yitzchak. Yitzchak was an old man. V'tikahena einov, and his eyes got weak. Mirois from seeing. Yitzchak Avinu was going blind at this time in the Torah. Why was Yitzchak going blind? Okay, he's an old man, fine. An older man, he got older, so not everybody's eyesight is going to be so strong. And the simple explanation of why he went blind is so that when Yaakov Avinu will come in and steal the birthright, Yitzchak won't be able to see who it really is. He's only going to hear the voice. He'll feel the hairy skin and say, "Okay, fine, it's Esav." But Chazal are not all satisfied with that answer. What is it that caused the blindness of Yitzchak? Meaning, we know that everything that happens to a person in this world, to a great extent, is midah keneged midah, is measure for measure. That means that there must be something that Yitzchak himself went through, something that Yitzchak himself did, that brought on the blindness. A great man like that doesn't just go blind just like that. So what is it that caused the blindness of Yitzchak Avinu? And the final question of the evening over here is that once that Yitzchak gives over the brachas, and he gives over the bracha to Yaakov Avinu instead of to Esav, thinking that it is Esav, and then Esav, as we know, comes into the room and he realizes what has happened over here, and he sees that in fact he lost the bracha. So the pasuk tells us that Esav begins asking Yitzchak, does he have a bracha that is left? And the pasuk says over here the following. Somewhere the pasuk says. The pasuk says, "Vayoyma Esav el Aviv," and Esav said to his father, "Habracha achas hilacha Avi. You don't even have one little bracha, one blessing left for me. Barcheni gam ani. I want you to bless me also, Avi, my father." Vayisa Esav koiloi vayevk, and Esav lifted his voice and he cried out. Now we know that the reason that Esav didn't get the bracha over here is because many moons ago, when he came back from killing and murdering in the fields, he was tired and he was hungry. And Yaakov is stirring the pot of lentil soup. And Esav says, I'll sell you the first right for a bowl of that soup. And Yaakov Avinu, not like that exactly, Yaakov convinces him that if you'll sell me the birthright, I'll give you the soup. And Esav says, well, what's the birthright all about anyway? And he tells him, there's mitzvahs and there's Torah and you have to be careful and Hashem is going to watch you, and if you do the wrong thing, it's a death penalty. So Esav says, what I need is Rabbi Yivaz Esav es b'charasei. And Esav, he's mavazi, he embarrasses and he shames the birthright. He could care less about it. He'd rather have a bowl of soup than the nitzchius, than the eternal link in the chain from Avram, Yitzchak to Esav. He'd rather have a bowl of soup than have all of that. So obviously, the world of Ruchnius, the world of spirituality, doesn't really matter that much to Esav. So how come it is that when Yitzchak is giving this amazing bracha over here, and the Esav walks in, he realizes he lost the blessing, suddenly he wants a bracha? He cares so much about the blessing, the eternal blessing of his father, Vayef, that he raises up his voice and he cries out. Why is Esav crying at the end of the day? So we have, I think that makes it about 5 different questions over here. And as we go through one by one, I hope that as Hashem will see that there is a common thread that is running throughout. So the first question that we asked is that why does the Torah have to go back once again and teach us the yichus, teach us the lineage, the background in the life of Rivka Imenu? We already know where she's coming from. We already know where she's from. We know who her father is, who her brother is. The Torah doesn't have to waste its words over and over and over again. So why does it tell us such things? So I want to see the other Meforshim, and then we'll come to the famous Rashi over here. So the Netziv writes on these psukim the following idea. If you look before that, it says that, if you look right after that, it says that when they were davening, V'yenter Yitzchak la'Hashem l'noichach ishtoi, V'yeser lo Hashem v'tar Rivki ishtoi. And it says that the reason that they are davening over here is because because Rivka was a barren woman. They're already married. It comes out. They got married when Rivka was 3. So for 10 years, she's not roy, she's not fit to have children. And then 10 years after that, they don't have any children. So they're married 20 years. 10 of those years where she could have been bearing children, she didn't have children. So she's an akar, she is a woman that is barren. So says the Netziv the following. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make Rivka Imenu barren? Why didn't they just have a bracha of having a child right away? Would have been such a beautiful thing. They could have started their family, there could have been a Yaakov, there could have been the beginning of Klal Yisrael. Why? Says that it said, Mishum Shaisa Ma'aram. She's from the city Aram, Padan Aram. V'achais Lavan Ha'arami. And she is the sister of Lavan Ha'arami. Lavan Ha'arami, he's the trickster. Even though he's from the Arami, but we switch around the letters, Ramai, he's a trickster. Her brother was Lavan the trickster. If you would leave things to the nature of the world. Shubaneha achzorim. Her children would have been pretty ruthless people. She came from a horrible city with terrible people around. Her brother is Lavan, the biggest trickster in the world. Her father was Besuel, the biggest Russia in the world. And therefore, she was around that all of her life. So the teva, the nature of the child that would have been born from a Rivka Imenu, they would have been achzarim, they would have been very cruel and despicable people. Al kain this akra, that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made her a barren woman. So she should not have children that are going to come out to be achzarim, to be cruel. And when she ends up giving birth afterwards, she has a child, it's nothing short of a wonder and a miracle. However, in the beginning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not make her nature, a nature that was fitting to have children, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want originally that a child is going to come out of a woman who grew up in such a horrible place, surrounded by horrible people. It seems to be, as the Netziv is saying, it makes a hashbah. It has an impact on a person who they are around. And therefore, why have Rivka Imenu bring such a child into the world? They davened and they davened and they davened. They changed their nature as a result of the davening. She was able to have such a special child. The Orach Chaim writes on these words that really the truth of the matter is we don't need to know who Rivka's father was, and we don't need to know who Rivka's brother were. We know that already. Elalamed Sangoria al Rivka. It's coming to give us a good plug for Rivka. Why? Because later it says, or right after it says, Vayeser le Hashem. Who's tefillah? Remember, Yitzchak is in one corner davening for a child. Rivka is in another corner davening for a child. Who does HaKadosh Baruch Hu listen to at the end of the day? Rivka or Yitzchak? So the pasuk says, V'yeter loi. Hashem listened to Yitzchak. Why listen to Yitzchak over Rivka? Says the Orach Chaim. Why? You might think that the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to Yitzchak more than listened to Rivka is because she wasn't such a big tzaddikus after all. She wasn't such a righteous woman. And therefore Hashem says, who am I going to listen to? The big tzaddik, Yitzchak, or the little tzaddikus who's not such a big tzaddikus, Rivka? I'll listen to him. Chas v'shalom, don't say such a thing. Ki lo roihi lishma yalei Elokim. That's why it tells us she's really the daughter of Besuel. Loimar, to teach you. That's why Hashem listened to Yitzchak instead of her. Kihu ben Avraham. He's the son of Avram Avinu. V'hi bas Besuel. She's the daughter of Besuel. To teach us, she's from that city. She's from a city, Padan Aram, which is a wicked place also. So she's not that she on her own did not have the merit. She was a very righteous woman. But she had surrounded in her life. She was surrounded by very unrighteous people. And those unrighteous people are going to have influence on a person. Therefore, says the Or HaChaim, Lo hukshu tfilas Rivka tfilas Yitzchak. The tefillah, the prayers of Rivka were not as kosher. They were not as pure. They were not as lofty and elevated as the prayers of Yitzchak ben Avram, who grew up in the house of Avram and Sarah. And he goes further and he writes, it's coming to teach us over here why she's known as Achais Lavan, the sister of Lavan. Because we have to know, how is it possible that Rivka Imenu, our great matriarch Rivka, how could she give birth to a child named Esav? Esav was a Rasha Marusha, a very wicked man. She's a tzaddikus. She's a righteous woman. She's pure. She certainly had all the greatest kavanas, the greatest intentions in the world when she was giving birth to children and in conceiving children. She wants a tzaddik. She wants a righteous boy. How did she have the most wicked son in the world at that time? So it would seem that people would say from the outside, maybe Rivka wasn't such a tzaddikus after all. Maybe she has some side of wickedness that's in her. That's how she could have such a wicked son. Says the Or HaChaim, no. Toima eich mi betvain. Lezeh omar ki zehi siba ledavar yoser achas Lavan harami. That's why you should know she is the sister of the brother Lavan Harami, the trickster. What does that mean? That he was even a bigger, more wicked than his father Besuel. So what does that have to do with the child? Because we have a Chazal. The Chazal tell us the following. Roiv Abanim, the majority of sons that a person has, Doimin la'achia. I'm sorry, that when a woman has children, so who are those children going to be most similar to? La'achia, to the brother of the mother. The brother says that when you want to date a girl, so how do you check out the girl to know what her pedigree is? You check into the brothers. When you see who the brothers are, so, and the Maral has a whole thing over there, remember all the mystical details of what it is, the whole thing over there, but he says if you check into the brothers, it will reveal to you who the girl is. Says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, you know why the Torah is telling us once again that she is the sister of Lavan? Because you have to know the only way that she was possible to have a son whose name was Esav is because she had a brother whose name was Lavan. Ulezeh yatsa Esav. That's why she had Esav. V'zula zeh, had it not been for Esav, for Lavan, tzadikim hayotzim mimena, she would only have tzadikim come from her. Ki tzadekis gamora haisa, she was a perfect tzadekis, completely righteous. And that's why it is over here in the pasuk that Yitzchak is the one that's listened to. She is the one that is not listened to. The reason she has a child who comes out to be an Esav is because she had a brother whose name was Lavan. But she was a big tzaddikus. She was a very righteous woman, says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. If it would not have been for Lavan, all of her children would have been the biggest tzaddikim in the world. We see already from the Nitziv and from the Or HaChaim that although that Rivka did nothing herself to be misyaches, to be connected to her wicked father and her wicked brother, although she herself became a great tzaddik, a very righteous woman, nevertheless, being in their presence, being related to them, being affected by them, says the Torah, has an impact on her tefillahs being answered, has an impact on her being even akara, being barren, because Hashem said, derech hateva, nature is that she's not going to have the greatest children in the world. And even when she does have children, finally, one becomes the biggest Rasha, maybe one of the biggest Rishayim of all time, because her brother was the biggest Rasha of that time. Says Rashi on these words, and we know this famous Rashi, I believe that we've spoken about it many times over the years. Don't we already know that she is the daughter of Besuel, the brother of Lavan, and she comes from a city called Padan Aram? We know that, says Rashi. Elo lahagid shivcha. It's coming to tell the great praise of Rivka. And what is that praise? Shaisa bas Rasha, she was the daughter of a wicked man, Besuel. V'achais Rasha, she was the sister of a Rasha, Lavan. Umekayimel anshe Rasha, the place that she came from, they were all Rishoyim, very wicked people. V'loy lamda mimaseyem, and nevertheless, Rivka, in her righteousness, she somehow did not learn from their evil ways. She was immersed in a place where everybody is not the best of people, wicked as Rashi is calling them and the Torah calls them. Nevertheless, in her great levels of tzidkus, of righteousness, she was able to withhold herself and not learn from the ways of the people that she was around. And Afal PK, nevertheless, the Nitziv and the Or HaChaim say, she might not have learned from them. She might not have followed in their footsteps. She might have risen up to a level of the most righteous woman in the generation. She was worthy of becoming the wife of Yitzchak Avinu, our father Yitzchak. Nevertheless, just being in their presence, being in their family, being related, has a negative hashpah, a negative impact that will impact even the birth of the child, says the Torah, that she ends up having an Esav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tries to push the children away, but they daven and they daven and they daven and they daven, and eventually she became not a kar anymore. She was no longer barren. She was worthy of having children. So this is one of the greatest fundamentals that Rashi and the others are speaking to us about, and that is the words, the famous words of the Rambam, Derech Briasa Shel Adam. The way of man is liyos nimshach b'deyosav u'memaisav achareya v'chaverav. A person is an inescapable reality. A person is going to be drawn after the mindset and the ideologies and the culture of the people that he is around. V'noyag b'minag anshe medinasai, and he will accustom himself to behave in a way like the people that are there in his city, in his state, in his country where he lives. That's why we have to try our best to be close to the righteous. Tamid, and be by wise people all the time. We'll learn from their actions. And we'll stay away from the wicked that go in darkness, that we should not learn from their deeds. Says the Rambam, we are creatures of habit. We are very impressionable. We are very easily swayed in our lives. We are drawn naturally, instinctively after some things, and we are drawn away from other things. And even things that we might tell ourselves, not interested in, it's not for me, I don't think it's such a good thing. As time goes on in life, if you stay around it for a long time, a person is going to be drawn in that direction. Like Chazal tell us, A person goes into the house, into the Beis HaBesamim. They go into the perfumery. They don't buy a single thing. They don't even test anything on the wrist. Nothing. But they stay in that shop for an hour or two. When they walk out, they're going to smell like perfume. You send that person into a tannery, formaldehyde, animal hides, you name it, all the stench that is there. He doesn't touch anything. He doesn't even get so close. He's just standing in the room. He walks out after an hour or two. He stinks. He smells. Says the Rambam, you might be a tzaddik. You might be a tzaddikis. You might be an unbelievable person. But if you're in the wrong seviva, you're in the wrong environment, it's going to have an impact on who you are, whether you like it or not. The next question that we addressed was, why is it that as Rivka has these two twins in her stomach, we see Vayisroitzitzu, they're running, Habanim Bikirba, they're running around inside of her. And Rashi tells us, where were they running to? Rashi says they were running the following: Keshai so Iveres al Pischei Torah, when she walked past the Beis Midrash, past the yeshiva, Yaakov Ratzum Afarkes Lotzeis. Yaakov tried to get out of there. Why is he trying to get out of there? He's learning with the Malach Hashem. He's learning with an angel. He's got the greatest chavrusa in the world, the greatest study partner in the world. He could be learning and learning and learning. Eventually he'll come out when he's born. He'll go to yeshiva, he'll sit and learn. But why forfeit the opportunity to be with the angel? So they say over the following answer: a malach is a great chavrusa if it's just you and the angel. But don't forget that Esav was also inside of that womb. And they were sharing the same place. And for Yaakov Avinu to be stuck alone together with Esav Arasha inside of his mother's womb, even though it's like a sanctuary in there and there's an angel there that's teaching him and the Shekhinah's light is shining down, but to be stuck in such close quarters with Esav, to be mushpa, to be influenced, to be worn down by Esav, my brother, that one day is going to want to come and kill me. Says Yaakov, it's better to get out of this place and into the Beis Midrash to get away from Esav. Same idea. That even though you're Yaakov Avinu, you're a righteous man, your whole life is Torah, you're learning with the Malach Hashem, you're learning with an angel. But if Esav is there, since the nature of a person is to be drawn after the people that they are with, the people that they are by, it's inescapable. So Yaakov said, I've got to get out of here ASAP, so I can escape the clutches of my evil brother Esav. Next thing, we saw over here that the pasuk tells us that Rivka, that Yaakov, Yitzchak loved Esav, and Rivka loved Yaakov Avinu. Now, why is it that Yaakov loves, that Yitzchak loves Yitzchak loves Esav so much? Kitzai befiv, because he was very tricky with his mouth. As Rashi points out, he used to ask his father all of these halachic shaylas that are not even true. He used to say, Tati, how much tithing do we take on salt? Everybody knows you don't tithe salt. But Yitzchak said, wow, such a tzaddik of a little kid over here. He's asking questions. He's so machmir, he's so strict in halacha. Wow, what a little righteous, what a tzaddik, as they say. Says in Tziv, don't think that Yitzchak and Rivka disagreed on who was the bigger righteous son. Shneim yadu deikar azer asher olav nemar ki beyitzchak yikar lechazer beyitzchak v'lo yikol Yitzchak ki Yaakov yoshev el Avram b'Torah. They both knew that the main offspring of Yitzchak is going to be Yaakov Avinu. He's the one sitting in the tent of study, following in his footsteps. V'raka aval chayzeres hayolel Yitzchak is Esav. But the reason that Yitzchak loved Esav so much, the ki Esav midem mishamash leika avda. Esav served his father like an eved, like a slave. V'nena b'shimusha ma'oid, and Yitzchak was benefited greatly from the work of his son Esav. And therefore, Masha'en Ken Yaakov, Hayu Yoshev Oyel, and Yaakov just sat in the tents all day. He was learning. He's busy learning. He didn't go and he didn't help his father. He didn't serve his father too much. Therefore, there was an added love that he had for his son Esav. Esav was the master of kibbud avim, of honoring his father. He did everything for his father. Yes, Father, whatever you need, Father, I'm here for you, Father. He's serving hand and foot. Whatever you need, the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, I'm always here for you. What can I get for you? You're mishamish me, you're serving me. You're taking care of me. I'm now indebted to you. I have a karasatayv, I have gratitude towards you. I'm connected to you in a way that I'm not connected to my son Yaakov Avinu over here for all that you have done. And therefore, Yitzchak loved Esav. Esav was such a tzaddik. He wasn't. He was playing games with his father. Tzai b'piv. He was trickster. But he was serving him. And someone that serves me, someone that does for me, someone that takes care of me, I feel indebted to them. And therefore I'm connected to them. As the Rambam says, the way of a human being is, we're drawn after the people that we are around. People that do favors for us, we are drawn after them. The Oznayim L'Torah says over here, you know what the difference was? The difference is that Rivka grew up in the house of Lavan and Bethuel. She knew what tricksters are. She knew that her brother was as sly as a fox. She knew that her father was wicked as possible. So she could smell out somebody that was a trickster. So when she sees Esav going around, Tati, what tithing do you take on the salt? Tati, what can I do for you? Abba, what can I get you? She's like, this guy is as big as a trickster as my brother and my father. I can't trust this person, Esav. On the other hand, Yitzchak Avinu grew up in the house of Avram and Sarah. Their house was a house of Kedusha, of holiness, of honesty, of integrity. It never crossed his mind there could be someone that's a trickster like that. So when he heard Esav open his mouth and say, Daddy, what do I take on the salt? How much tithing? He thought that his son is actually being sincere. So once again, Yitzchak grows up in the house of spiritual luxury. He grows up in a house of Avram and of Sarah. He sees only emes and kedusha and holiness and sanctity. So that influences him. Rivka, that's the milah, that's the advantage that she has. She grew up in a house of tricksters, so she understands what a trickster is. And then, we asked, why is that Yitzchak is blind? What was the cause of the blindness of Yitzchak? So the Das Zakenim of Bali Tosfos says an amazing thing. He's quoting a midrash, and the midrash says the following: Mishum she'ohav Esav kitzai befiv. What's the reason we said that Yitzchak loved Esav so much? Because Esav was tzai befiv. He was a trickster. He bribed him. He bribed his father into liking him. Says the Midrash, Uksiv, it says later on in the Torah, Ki ha-shoiched ya'aver einei pikchim. Shoiched, bribery, blinds the eyes of the wise. It doesn't matter how wise you are. Over there, it's talking, let's say, about a judge. Someone's a judge, and they're a wise judge, they're a good judge, but somebody comes and offers a little bribery under the table, even $2. It already makes me blind to see what the em is, to see what the truth is. Says the Midrash, you know why Yitzchak went blind over here? Because he kept taking the bribes from his son Esav, who was tricking him time and time and time again. And he fell for it. It's hard to speak about Yitzchak in such a way, but he was into the trickery of his son Esav, always trying to see the best, and bribery blinds the eyes even of the wisest of men, even the mind of a Yitzchak. And that's why he went blind. So once again, the same idea. It's the influence of the people that are around a person that is going to have the greatest impact on that person. And perhaps to me, which is the most maybe surprising of it all, is at the very end, as we saw after Yitzchak ends up giving over the brachas to Yaakov Avinu, that was supposed to go to Esav. And Esav walks in, as we see, it's like Yitzchak walks off the stage and Esav walks into the stage, just like that. They just missed each other. And Yaakov and Yitzchak said, who is this? He said, Esav, B'charecha, I'm Esav, your firstborn. And Yaakov Avinu says, I didn't know. I gave away the bracha already. And Esav, at that moment, Vayisa Esav koiloi, Esav lifts up his voice, raises his voice, Vayevk, and he cries, what are you crying about, Esav? You're a Rasha. You're a murderer. You're a womanizer. You're a trickster. You tricked your own father into believing you. You don't have redeeming qualities that we see in the Torah. What are you crying about that you lost the bracha? So perhaps the answer is that Esav also grew up in the house of Yitzchak and of Rivka. Esav, although that he was going in the wrong way and doing the wrong things and he was being a bad boy, it's true. But he grew up in the house of tzaddikim. He knows what ruchnius is. He knows what Torah is. He knows what a bracha, what a blessing means coming from the holiest man in the world, Yitzchak. And therefore, when he lost the opportunity to receive a little bit of the goodness from his father, from Yitzchak, Vayevk, he begins crying. And the tears are so strong, Yitzchak finds another bracha to give to his son. Is it true, my son, that you really have some neshama that's inside of there? You really have some ruchnius inside? You want some kedusha? Is that true? I'll find a bracha for you. And he gives Esav a bracha that he pulled out of his hat. It wasn't supposed to be given, but he found a blessing to give, because even Esav, a Rasha, who lived a wicked life, who lived a very degenerative life, nevertheless, he's still the son of Yitzchak and of Rivka. He grew up in their house. He was exposed to their life of Kedusha. And that also has an impact on a person. And for that, he felt, I missed out on the chance to get a blessing from my father. How could such a thing be? Which means at the very end, the Torah is teaching us that not only are the people in your life that are negative influences, mashpia, do they have an influence and an impact on you, whether you like it or whether you don't, whether you're a tzaddik or you're a tzaddikis, whether you're on this level or not, it's all around. It has impact, it has influence. That's true. But the other thing is also true. And that is that when a person is exposed to Kedusha, when they're exposed to righteousness, when they are exposed to goodness, when they're exposed to chesed, exposed to emes, to truth, that also as a hashpah, it also makes an impact on a person. And a person that could be the farthest thing away from Kedusha could come in contact with Kedusha, with holiness, with beauty, with spiritual nobility. And that will also have a tremendous impact on a person, even a Rasha like an Esav. At the end will say, Abba, please, give me one bracha. How could I lose out on all of your spiritual power and your strength and your blessing? And therefore, these parshas, and that's really the mastery of the avos and the imahos, the forefathers and the matriarchs, they're here to teach us such a valuable and important lesson. And I think that we're seeing a lot of this going on right now in the world. And that is, we are all creatures of the place that we live. And we are all products of those that were mashpia, that had impact on us. Whether it's from childhood, whether it's from teenage years, whether it's from adult years, whether it's when we're older, everyone that we are around in our lives has an impact on us and makes us think and look at the world in a certain way. The Jewish people right now are at a place, a crossroads in history that really has not existed, I think, ever before. Even after the Holocaust, it was not like this, because the world is so global right now. Everything's on stage. Everything is out there in the open. We all see it. There's the Jews, and there's really the rest of the world. And even though they got up yesterday at the rally and they all supported us very nicely, Baruch Hashem, and they said nice things about the Jewish people, but it's pretty clear right now. There's the Jews, and there really is the rest of the world. And the Jewish people are being forced right now to a place in history to decide for ourselves, which part of the world do we belong to? Who are the influencers in our life? What is the direction that we are going to take? What is the pride that we're going to have inside of ourselves as being part of the greatest nation in the world that can make a rally for 300,000 people and there's not 1 ounce of damage, there's not one fight that breaks out, there's not any cruelty, nothing goes on over there except the Jewish people coming together from all backgrounds together as one. And Jews in Eretz Yisrael, the chesed that is going on is insurmountable right now. The acts of kindness, the love, people traveling from America to Israel. I have friends that are Rabbanim, and they're traveling on these solidarity missions, going there right now, spending time with the soldiers and the victims of who lost husbands in the slaughtering and the murders, and children that lost their parents. We're a whole different nation. We're a different breed. We're a different type of person. And who's going to have the influence? Who's going to have the impact on us? Says the Rambam, you can't escape that. Everyone's going to influence us. Everybody will. Who are you going to choose to influence you? Is it going to be Chachamim with Tzadikim, the wise, righteous people of the world? Or the other people that are in the world that are not so wise and not so righteous and not leading in that path of Hashem and of Torah that we're supposed to? Who is it going to be? Says the Torah, even an Esav was moved to tears at the end when he realized, I'm going to lose out on my father's blessing. How could such a thing be? So which direction is our nation going to go in right now? Are we going to go to the side of Hashem, the side of Klal Yisrael, the side of being proud like Yoina Hanavi stands up on the ship when it's about to go down, and he says, Ivri anoichi v'es Elokim, forget the exact words, Ivri anoichi v'es Elokim, and I only serve Hashem. I'm an Ivri. Ivri is the language of Aver. I'm on one side, and the rest of the world is on the other side. I'm an Ivri anoichi. I serve you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the resurgence of the brotherhood of Klal Yisrael that's going on in the world right now, the resurgence of Kedusha, people that never saw a mitzvah in their life, taking on mitzvahs right now, left and right. You were all here on Shabbos. You heard this young man who went through for those of you who were not here, we had 2 brothers that were in the horrific music festival on October 7th, and they're 2 of the survivors. And at one point, one of them who was a medic and he was trying to save lives, they told me afterwards he saved like 80 lives on that day of people that were wounded and that were shot. He was able to save 80 lives. At one point, they were like in a tented area. Bullets are flying all around in all directions. There's nothing to do. You're going to get shot. You're going to get killed. There's nothing to do. They have no protection. And this guy, not religious, speaks to a group of whatever 80 young men and women in Israel, dreadlocks and tattoos and pink hair and nose rings and belly rings and everything in between. And he says, Rabbi Tai, we have nothing else to do right now except to pray to Hashem. Repeat after me, Shira Malois, Esai Nailorim Yezri. And he says, I kid you not, every person there began repeating and saying the words of Tehillim. And we felt like there was a force field of Kedusha, of holiness, of protection around us. Not a single bullet entered into that tent. Nobody that was there got shot and was killed. How do you explain such a thing? The only way you can explain such a thing is there's a Rebbeinu Shalom, there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when a Jew calls out to Hashem, when a Jew acts in that way, it has the greatest impacts on the world that you could possibly imagine. So, which path is the one that we are going to take? Which is the direction that we're going to go into? What kind of a life are we going to lead right now at this moment? We'll be like the soldiers in Gaza that 50 years, 30 years, 50 years, 60 years, never put tefillin on, started putting on tefillin every single day. They never wore tzitzis. They laughed at all the Jews that were, now they're wearing tzitzis every single day. And they can't keep up with the amount of requests that there are for tzitzis. There's 300,000 already, they need more. They're moving, there's a hashpah, there's an impact. The Frum Yidden, the non-religious Jews, everyone's coming together and we're being mashpia, having a great influence on one another. And when Klal Yisrael goes in that direction, that's the biggest siyata d'shemaya, that is the greatest blessing that we could possibly have. There was an amazing story that I heard just recently, meaning today. There are a lot of miracles that are being revealed right now about the people that were saved on October 11th, on that day, Simchas Torah, over a month ago. One of the women that was saved, her and her family, is the following story. She lives on one of the kibbutzim that are out there on the border of Gaza. And the truth of the matter is, pretty much everybody in that particular kibbutz was slaughtered, Rahman al-Islam. She and her husband were not. Why not? About 2 or 3 years ago, this woman started getting interested in Shabbos. She's in a completely secular kibbutz, but she started learning about Shabbos. She found out about Shabbos. She got interested and she tells her husband, we're going to start keeping Shabbos. Her husband was not really interested in keeping Shabbos, but he's a good husband. He went along, he acquiesced his wife's request, and they began keeping Shabbos. But she was not enjoying Shabbos on the kibbutz. Secular kibbutz, people are in their cars, they're on their phones, they're watching TV, they're on the motorcycle, cooking barbecues. It's not for her. It's Shabbos on the kibbutz, not for her. She said to her husband, I don't feel comfortable here for Shabbos. I don't mind living here during the week. I don't feel comfortable during Shabbos. She said, look, I have some religious family members who live in another town. I spoke to them already. They said we could come if we want every week for Shabbos. They're happy to have us. She tells her husband, I think we're going to start going there for Shabbos. Fine, says the husband. That's what we want to do. That's what we'll do. And so for like the last year, 2 years, every single Shabbos, almost every single Shabbos, her and her husband, if they have kids at that time, pack up the car, drive to the cousin, they spend Shabbos outside the kibbutz. The day of Simchas Torah, which is Shabbos, breaks out and it's pandemonium on the kibbutz. Now, this woman was 9 months pregnant, leading up to Simchas Torah. She said to her husband, normally we go away for Shabbos. I'm 9 months pregnant. The hospital that we're going to go to is close to the kibbutz. She says, I think we're going to stay home for Simchas Torah. I don't want to go away. It's too much for me to travel. And they invited a few friends to come and be with them, and we're going to stay home. So the one Shabbos that she was not away was the Shabbos of Simchas Torah, October 7th. So how did she not get killed? So listen to the story. They suddenly hear the shooting and the screaming and the cries going on outside, and they realize that things are not good. And they know that when you hear that kind of noise and those kind of shots and that screaming and the shrieking that's going on, the first thing you do is you run to the sealed room, you run to the protected room over there, the machsan, and you close the door behind you and you daven for your life that everything's going to be okay. So they run into the sealed room, the safe room, they close the door behind them. It's not hermetically sealed, so there's like little cracks, so they can still hear the noise that are going. And they hear the shooting, and they hear the screaming, and they hear the terrorists screaming and yelling, and they hear the terrorists come passing by their house, and they're davening for their life that everything should be okay, and they hear the terrorists walk past their house and go to the next house over. And they sit in that room for hours on end, hearing the shooting and the screaming and the crying and the shrieking and everything, wondering what's going to happen. The terrorists never come back to their house. After hours and hours and hours, finally the Israeli police force, the army comes in, and they're searching for survivors, and they find this woman 9 months pregnant, her husband, and the couple of friends that they invited for Simchas Torah. And everybody was puzzled. Oh, how is it possible that of every single house on the block, the terrorists skipped over this one. As has come to the attention of everyone, and the world should see this as well, these terrorists, they knew exactly where they were going, every step that they took. Because in all of these kibbutzim and all of these settlements that they had there are many Arab workers that would be there during the week. Arabs that were builders, Arabs that were working in the fields, Arabs that were taking care of the co-ops and the like. And these Arabs that were coming from across the line over there, they were all spies for Hamas and for the Palestinians. And so they came back across the line, and when they were planning this big attack, they made maps of exactly the houses where everything is, what you're going to find, how many people over here, so you can be able to kill and wipe out as many as possible. When they started killing the terrorists, they found on the terrorists that they killed, on many of them, the maps of the kibbutzim that they were coming into. And it was laid out exactly so they would know where to go. They find the map of this particular kibbutz of the terrorists that came to kill in that day and that skipped over their house. And they open up the map, and on the map it says, by her house, not usually here for Shabbos. Simchas Torah was Shabbos. So they figured Shabbos Yom Tiv, for sure they're not going to be there. And the terrorists decided, why waste our time? There's too many people to kill over here. And they skipped over her house altogether. And she and her husband, and by now her baby that was born, and the guests that came to their house, they all survived. Why? Because she's a woman keeping Shabbos. How can you keep Shabbos in a kibbutz that's not keeping Shabbos? I don't want to be around a place that's a negative influence on me. Let's go to my cousins who keep Shabbos, who live in a town where they shut off the streets, where there's no cars, where you can feel Shabbos. We're all going to be influenced. We're all going to be directed. We're all going to be pulled. It's just a question of which direction we're going to be pulled in. Will we be pulled into the world of Kedusha, of Yitzchak, of Rivka, of Avram, of Sarah, of Yaakov, Avinu, and all of his family? Of Torah and of mitzvahs, we're going to be pulled into that world? Because we're realizing that the divide between the Jewish people and the rest of the world is very big right now. I just heard from a Rabbi Kalish, who's master of education. He was saying in a shir the other day that he went on a plane. The other day I had to fly someplace. And he said, and I felt a little bit like this also last time I flew. He says, we feel that we're different right now. The whole world's looking at us. Everywhere you go, there's eyes glued to you. And he said, you know what? I usually, when I get onto the plane, I make myself comfortable. I take off my hat and my jacket. I make myself comfortable like everybody else on the plane. He said, but by the time I got on the plane, I felt so separate from everybody else already. I just left my hat on the entire time. Already I'm different. So what's the big deal if I leave it on now? I'm not going to get comfortable anyway. So the divide is getting bigger and wider. And we have to make decisions for ourselves. Which side are we going to? The side that's pulling us and encouraging us and placing us in the side of good? Or Khalila can continue in that side over there that's not been historically has not been a good place for the Jewish people to be in. It's only right now history repeating itself. You can follow every exile that the Jewish people go through in all of history. It's always the same exact story, and the story is, God forbid, is coming back again, and that is whenever the Jewish people get too comfortable in the land that they are a part of, and too comfortable with the people around us, and too much like the people around us, that is when they turn against us, God forbid. Whenever we are strong in our Jewish identity and firm in our beliefs and confident in what it means to be a Jew and proud of that and being drawn in that direction, we are the invincible nation of Am Yisrael. May we be Zeichem Yetz Hashem to continue to keep the messages of our forefathers and our matriarchs in our mind at all times, to realize that everything makes an impact, everything has an effect on a person, whether you are aware of it or you are not aware of it. And if you are aware of it, then we have to be that much more sensitive, and we have to strengthen the impacts of the positive, of the holiness, of the sacredness. And in that merit, Be'ez Hashem, as even Esav was zeicha to one last bracha from his father Yitzchak, we, the end of the generations of the Jewish people, we should be zeicha to that one final blessing that all of us are yearning for, and that is the blessing, the birchas, Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'mheira v'yameinu. Have a good night, everyone. Nice to see you, Ma.